Jordy the Kid, is that you?
You ain't taking me in, law dog. You should have brought yourself back up.
Hell, kid, I should have done a lot of things. You just stay put, this'll be over in no time.
Yeah. Fella robs his in truck, kills a few Pinkertons, and he has to go to jail for that?
Dispatch, Jory the Kid is 10-7. Cool. Chances are when you hear about the M14, it's a toss-up of many things. It's either gonna be beloved, hated, or somewhere in the middle. And typically with these type of things, the truth, that is, it typically is somewhere in the middle. Well, nonetheless, we are going over a M14, well, I would say technically a variant, the Springfield M1A, but for all intents and purposes, to me, I look at this thing and I see the M14. Gentlemen, videos like these are made possible thanks to sponsors like Americana pipe dream apparel, fantastic young Zoomers, getting after the milsurb space and arena. They have everything you need to take your milsurb drip to a whole nother level. LARP hard in your mother's basements with many cool uniforms, and they are always getting in cool camo on the website, so I'd encourage you to stay in touch with what they have going on. Not only do they have cool camo, but they have night vision knives, manuals, MREs, a bunch of crazy accoutrement, and they want your business, and they shall have your business. So I encourage you to go check them out. Big thank you, Americana Pipe Dream Apparel. No, I did get the optic from Optics Planet, the optic sponsor of the channel. Helps out keeping costs down when running a business. So I do appreciate them, and they want to hook you up. Like I said, code admin, 7% off the entire store. Big thank you to Optics Planet. Now, the M14 is arguably one of the more interesting chapters in American small arms development and firearms history. Coming fresh off the W of World War II, the United States is looking to replace their small arms arsenal. And I do enjoy the history of this part because I find it rather interesting, especially looking at the World War II small arms. The logistical supply chain of getting guys 45 ACP, 30 cal carbine, 30 cal in general, BAR box mags, belts. There is a lot going on into a infantry platoon at that time. And so the logistics that is the United States is looking at that and they're thinking, what if we can streamline this? And you have to give it to the Americans. They weren't getting bombed into oblivion by any other nation, so they were a logistical powerhouse. I think of the Fat Electrician episode where he talks about how there was floating ice cream barges in the Pacific Theater.
If you're not picking up on a punt down, I'm trying to tell you that ice cream is essentially the new booze.
We were just flexing on the Axis powers by the end of the war. I mean, we also had nuclear bombs, but that's neither here nor there when you have the surface of the sun that you can drop from a B-29 bomber.
Bomb them.
So the American powerhouse, the strongest nation in the world, still is, baby, USA, comes up with the M14. Now this, of course, is not that M14, this being the civilian model, only in semi-automatic. The idea was you can combine a bunch of different arms, you give these guys full auto just in case they need to lay down the hate, and you give them a 20-round box magazine. And the development to get there is actually, in my mind, interesting, and we're kind of going to speed run it though, because I am not Forgotten Weapons, so I am not that guy. He actually has a really cool video on the M14 that I would go check out, along with other guys like Nine Hole, Grantham. They have some fun M14 videos. The development is essentially coming down to the T44, which is what would become the M14, and the T48 was what we would know as the FAL, an early variant of it. And they ultimately settle on the M14, a big claim being that they had all the machining and tooling already kind of spun up thanks to the M1 Garand, which before this, they were doing some experimental M1 Garands during the war, shorter paratrooper tanker models, box mag models, but as we know, they really didn't see widespread adoption. So T44 goes to the trials, beats out the Belgian FNFAL, the T48, and America has a new battle rifle, all American made, and it has that sweet profile that reminds probably a lot of guys of the M1 Garand. I could see a lot of the leadership at the time that fought in World War II, maybe they were directly boots on the ground, infantry officers, worked their way up the chain after the war, or they were in higher leadership positions, really just loving the M1 Garand, and it reminded them of that beautiful M1. So we get the M14. Honestly, really good gun in some aspects, really bad gun in others. It's regarded as an accurate firearm, but once you get to the jungles of Vietnam, it wets the bed. It is not what the troops are desiring. And the M16 comes along where you can carry much more ammo for it. There's some instances of long-range reconnaissance patrol guys carrying 1,000+ rounds of 5.56 on these crazy patrols, which would be very hard to do with 7.62 by 51. 7.62 by 51, that weight adds up pretty quick. As someone that shot a lot of these battle rifles and enjoyed the subject, and not just shooting them for the sake of fun shooting them, but also trying to get a glimpse into the reality that would go into a duty use where you are carrying an ammo loadout, that 7.62 weight adds up pretty quick. I think the most I have done is 10 mags, and it is ridiculous. It feels very heavy. One of the more realistic loadouts of guys in the global war on terror using battle rifles, say a gentleman that used the G3K, the 12-inch variant of Mr. Dave Radband, he told me that he would carry 4 mags on his person and then have spare ammo in his assault pack, and that seemed to be a common trend of like a 4 mag loadout, especially if you're rolling with a platoon of guys. Makes a lot of sense. You don't have to lean as heavy on your individual rifle loadout, say if you're the 7.62 by 51 NATO guy. Kind of a tangent, but it adds into the whole scope of things when we're looking at the whole package. Let me cook. I do want to say that it would be an interesting world to see what that would look like if the Americans adopted the FNFAL, but it is hard to quantify the nationalistic pride that goes into your own country's rifle. I'm sure there are mathematicians that could come up with a formula and equation that says, hey, with these guys, with this gun, with the homemade gun, they shot better, or maybe with the foreign-made gun, they shot better, but they liked using the homemade gun because it reminded them of picking up the pretty girl, making her your wife, taking your kids to little league ball games, coming home, eating American-made apple pie, driving that sports car. It's all Americana. Red, white, and blue. It is hard to quantify that, and that's what the M14 was. A homemade gun with the advantage of being all American. That being said, FNFAL is pretty good, and it was definitely used around the world. Now, though the M16 would replace the M14 in widespread use, the M14 actually still stuck around. It wasn't the main line infantry gun, but in a lot of cases, guys still had them for the DMR role. They wanted that 7.62 round. You would often see them with some sort of scope or magnification on it, and that trend would continue all the way up until actually now. I was doing the research for this, even though I was a terrible student in academia, both of high school and college, and I was a college dropout, but I was doing my homework nonetheless, and there are photos and instances of Ukrainian troops, either territorial defense guys, running around with Woodstock M14s. I think they were getting them from Latvia, I want to say. Nonetheless, so the gun is still around, it's still kicking, it's still putting the work in a hostile way. It was also, of course, used very heavily during the global war on terror. A lot of guys picking up M14s and rocking them either with, say, synthetic or composite stocks, wood stocks, or the EBR chassis that a lot of guys would end up using. I think there were guys that I worked with back at the PD that were vets of the global war on terror, and they were even saying that they used EBR chassis with the M14 when they were deployed to Afghanistan. What I'm trying to get at is, even though your grandpa may have used it when he was getting ready to fight in Vietnam, and now maybe your older brother used it when he was off in the Middle East fighting Uncle Sam's ventures yet again. The gun stuck around despite all of its hiccups. Now we get to this gun in particular, Admin's M1A. Okay, so this is going to be from Springfield Armory. Now I acquired this gun secondhand. I walked into my LGS, I saw it, and I said, okay, you're coming home with me. Big reasons why. I'm getting into my collecting phase. I want to get cool firearms, and this fills a pocket in American small arms development that was between, say, World War II and Vietnam. Of course, still around today. But nonetheless, I thought it was cool. I've been on a massive battle rifle kick, and I love having some more 7.62 guns around. And of course, it's just cool. Gun is cool. It's fun to own guns. So of course I bopped home and I was thinking, how am I gonna set this thing up? And typically with gun tubers, it's like a variation, or they try and do either the actual clone of the Sugar M14, which is a whole nother video topic. It's a very complex thing because it's not a 100% thing, and if it is, it's heavily debated. Some guys are saying it's the aim point 3000, aim point 5000, or aim point 5000 with the 2x magnifier fitted onto the optic. Which mount do they use? So it's a massive thing. And you have two ways to go about it. The easier way would definitely be the screen version. Throw a little aim point M68 or the comp on there, and or the Aimpoint Pro I should say, and you have a screen usable M14 Shugart rifle. Now this, I was not trying to go down that rabbit hole, but I was going for a more practical build, and I saw Ian McCollum's Shugart M14 video, and I thought, you know what? I actually like the idea of mounting something up front between the barrel and on the gas tube, so I went with that route. got a knockoff Weaver mount because I have real Weaver mounts and I don't feel like shaving those down. Had to do a little Dremel work to get it to fit in there. And then we have a 1-inch optic scope mount that I threw on a Surefire 660 head. And to be honest with you, if I'm running a 22-inch M14, I would probably rather go with some sort of IR laser aiming module. Would make more sense if you're doing nighttime stuff as a high-speed cool guy, considering you have a 22-inch M14 and these 660 bulb heads have a pretty bad throw. If it's for the time period, better than nothing, but compared to modern day stuff, not that great. The stock itself, I actually don't know what stock this is. I was trying to see if it was a Springfield stock, but it wasn't matching the photos I was seeing. It's definitely not a wood stock, but I have no idea. And then we have the SEI, the Smith Enterprise mount up top that goes over the ejection port over here. Or I should say it just goes over the whole action, I should say. Sometimes the AR-15 lingo creeps into all firearms. So then we have the Leupold VX3 HD, the newer version, the 1.5 to 5 on some Weaver tubes, keep it nice and low. And then we just got a generic sling, and that's pretty much it. It's very simple. There's only two things going on. It's just light optic setup. And then you got yourself M14 battle rifle that in theory could keep up with more modern guns. Maybe if you threw a better light on there or something. Now, this wasn't necessarily supposed to be a heavy duty should you buy it, should you get it type of video. This is more so show and tell with the fun historical context of the M14 if you're totally unaware. So during the shooting today, nothing too crazy to report. There were some malfunction. I was using some M80 ball, which isn't the typical ammo I would get from my ammo sponsor, Badlands Munitions. Great local Arizona company. Appreciate those guys very much. Encourage you to go check them out. Should have a discount code for you if you do find yourself in a room with them. Nonetheless, M80 ball doing the job. I was just trying to go for more of a military style round that would have been more common use with the M14. It wasn't necessarily like a DMR style setup, but in that weird quasi battle rifle DMR style role that I kind of set it up in. So it's a lot of yapping, but what I'm trying to say is gun did decent, but not great. Like the malfunctions were present, a lot of the mags being very picky, so that was a factor in my enjoyment. Malfunction. Oh my God. I love the M14. I will say the gun definitely feels clunky in some instances. Like if you're used to having a lot of the weight distributed in certain areas of your other rifles, it feels like the weight's gonna be a little bit more forward on the gun. So when you're doing your reloads, depending on where you're grabbing your ammo source from, I'll either conduct it with my right hand, activate and getting it back in, and it sounds like there's something in my mag, which is suboptimal, or depending, go on off the left side. So weird little setup, but it was a thing that you'd probably get around. If you're using it like an infantryman from the 1950s, chances are you're doing some different manual of arms, working off your belt webbing kit setup, and you're gonna figure it out because you have no other option. In reality, shooting here today, a lot of hiccups, a lot of jams and malfunctions. The mags were pretty picky. Some mags were just having problems getting into the guns. Maybe this is a big mag dependent thing depending on the weapon itself. Springfield itself has a storied history of not the best QC for these things from what I see and gather. And to be honest, if I was having to stake my life on this thing, I wouldn't be stoked, but I wouldn't hate it. It's better, I guess, than using one of my longbows. Have a better shot, unintended. I think if I were gonna get shot and killed by any bullet, I would at least want it to be the smallest round, a 308, and everything above. Like if I get taken out by a 50 cal, I would feel very honored that someone would think I'm worthy of a 50 cal round. That's where my mind goes sometimes. It's kind of. So I did kind of speed run over the gun's attachments. I didn't really go over the gun itself because I am kind of an idiot when it comes to these things. M14 expertise being way outside of my wheelhouse, I am just an appreciator. But gun itself, 22-inch barrel, got a good decent trigger, 2-stage. And I mean, the trigger is actually pretty pleasant to shoot. If you're feeling goofy, you can do a little bump fire action. It's doable. A 22-inch barrel in today's modern day and age definitely feels pretty long.
Why are you gay?
Especially when we see a lot of the trends with battle rifles that are much more modern. Think of the Scar H Assaulter setup. We think of the new SIG Spears, Chamberlain 6A, or the 277 Fury. Think of those more modern DSA FALs that are in 13-inch. A lot of the more practical carried methods. 22 inches, man, it feels a little muskety, I will say. That being said, when you're in the wide open terrain, you're not doing your CQB, Vans wearing, high-speed, skateboard kick flipping, flux raider defense having, room clearing, it's not that bad. I mean, we're out in the wide-ass open desert, having a 22-inch is kind of nice if this was your go-to gun. So, wow, this guy really is just in his own head. So you can see that there is no bayonet lug on the flash hider itself. This, I believe, came about during the time of the 1994 assault weapon ban. Springfield removed the attachment for the bayonet and then they never brought it back. Springfield, if somehow you see this, please bring back the bayonet lugs on your rifles. I think that is cool. Maybe I just have to buy a flash hider muzzle device for the M14 so I can throw a bayonet on there and do sit crowd control. Ultimately, I will say, kind of a quicker video was the goal for this. It has definitely been covered very heavily within the gun space, and I, of course, am adding to that noise, but it's the Library of Alexandria for me, and it gets it out of my head because I think about this stuff, and once I can film with it, I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's kind of like when you study for a test and you dump all the information afterwards. I will say the M14 would not be my first go-to battle rifle. I got a Scar H, and probably below that would be my HK91, and somewhere down the line after the FAL or an AR-10 would probably be the M14. Now, I will say if you are limited by what you have access to, maybe there is budget constraints with your government overlords and they only can provide you with an M14, it's not the worst option, right? It's better than not having a 308 that you can sling out to distance with to help cover your boys when you're doing the room clearing and the global war on terror fighting overseas. That makes a lot of sense. Now, all of that to say, I think the gun is super cool. It's a fun part of history, has a lot of pop culture significance. There's a lot of heroism behind Shugard's M14. Overall, it's a cool piece for the collection. Gentlemen, I have nothing else for you. I appreciate you stopping by, watching this far in the video. As always, Godspeed.